to the courtyard, into College Center, up the stairs to the cafeteria, out the doors of the cafeteria along the walkway to the Student Center, and we'll end on the second floor of the Student Center, and that's where we'll have our speak out. You all, or most of you, have chant sheets. I have volunteered to lead the chants, so I will say the first part. I'll say Black Lives Matter, and everyone will echo All Lives Matter. I'll say hands up, everyone will echo Don't Shoot.
All lives matter! All lives matter!
We want an end to all forms of discrimination and the full recognition of human rights. We want an immediate end to police brutality and the murder of black, brown, and all oppressed people. We want full employment. We want decent housing fit for the shelter of human beings. We want an end to the school-to-prison pipeline and quality education for all. We want freedom from mass incarceration and an end to the prison industrial complex. These can be reviewed along with others on FergusonAction.com, so I invite you to go there and take a look at it. I also just wanted to say words of Martin Luther King, somebody who I'm sure you're quite familiar with, who said that in case people are wondering why we are standing here, those of us who are not directly affected by this, those of us who are certainly not from Ferguson, those of us who are white, those of us who are not people of color. But Dr. King wrote in Letter from Birmingham Jail, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied to a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." It is not just about Mike Brown. It is about justice for all people, all living beings. We are all affected in some way, shape, or form by injustice. Some more than others, absolutely. But this is about our common humanity today. So I invite you to speak. Say what you need to say. Angie.
Okay, I'll start. I'm Angela Bodino. I teach English.
Can you speak up a little, Angie?
Okay, I'm Angela Bodino. I teach English. And a major principle in teaching literature and teaching writing is the power of culture. If we're not taking this seriously, we're not really understanding the power of culture. We can think of Germany and things that Hitler said, that a whole country accepted, and that was sort of included and integrated in laws that everyone thought was legal. How could that be? How could people think that? It's culture. It's the influence of culture. So if we're thinking that there's a whole group of people that should be commodified, that should be imprisoned more than whites for the same felony, then we're giving in to this influence of culture and we're not really thinking out of the box. So that's negative, and that's something we should all be afraid of, appreciating the power of culture to be so toxic and continue, and so we become an increasingly violent, divided world and country. But on the other hand, I have to say, having been here since like 1977 and having lived in Bridgewater since 1968, I see change. I see so much diversity, and I applaud the leadership of the college that has made this possible. I see diversity if I go to the mall. And on my block, where blacks were not allowed to live on my street, we now do have a black officer. And he was someone that coached at Bridgewater with my husband, and he's very friendly with everybody, very well accepted. So I'm optimistic and terrified at the same time. So I thank you for doing this.
Thank you,
Science department. I'm a scientist by trade. And I say that to say that you have to understand that race is a social construct. It was constructed so the privileged group can continue to gain all the economic wealth, and that they can marginalize, criminalize, disenfranchise, and oppress people of color. When this country was founded, black people were brought here enslaved, but they were not the first indentured servants. White people were indentured servants. And how this whole racist thing started was with to see that if we have a group that we can identify as servants because of their color, the color of their skin, then we can marginalize that group and oppress that group. But genetically, we are all the same. It's a social construct, race, that is, just to marginalize a group of people with more melanin than others for economic gain and to control the privilege for a certain class. So when you think about people who are standing next to you, just understand that genetically, we are all the same. We all derive from Africa. So you're just as African as I am. Be proud of it, okay?
Amen.
And we all just branched out. We're a family like a tree. We all have one root deep in the soil in Africa, and we branched out to different countries, okay? So understand that. We are all the same. And my belief is that if you're on earth, you belong here. You have a right to be here. So we all have a right to be here.
Thank you.
My name is Patterson, Auletta Social Science major here at RVCC. God created us all the same. Cut me open. I have the same organs as a white person. I bleed the same as a white person. So why should I be treated differently as a white person? So I just
Lynn Kowski, I'm a math professor here. This, for me, I'm Jewish, so you brought up knowledge of the Holocaust, and our biggest thing is never again, and how no action is bad as doing a negative action. Some of you might be thinking, what good is doing this? It's just one little community college in New Jersey. If everybody had that thought, then there'd be, nothing would ever get changed. There'd be nothing. So every little bit you do makes a difference. And always remember that. And don't just sit by and do nothing and let such controversy, that's Jimmy Fallon, I'm sorry, controversy happen in our society. Sitting back and doing nothing is as bad as taking negative action.
My name is James Smalley. All I wanted to say was, I wasn't at Ferguson. I can't really speak on behalf of Mike Brown. I can't speak on Darren Wilson. But I do know, whether you believe he committed a crime or not, he should have went to trial. He at least deserved that. Mike Brown's death deserves, discussion. And I just think that says something about our, justice system. I'm not to hate on the justice system. I just think at the repetitive times, something needs to be said. Like she said, no action is no better than negative action. And anyone hating on like a race or like on people, at the end of the day, that's not gonna solve anything. Hate ignorance, hate transgression. Fight for what's right, because I pray that, you or no one close to you gets served with injustice like that. That's all I got.
Something. My name is Andrea Vaccaro. I'm a professor of English as a second language here. I want to say that there's a lot of black men. There's a whole list that we were actually going to read, and we might still read, of between 2012 and 2014, where black men were being targeted specifically without a weapon and killed. To me, self-defense is something that obviously is an important thing, but there's ways to defend oneself without killing other people. And I think that the idea that use equal force is something that our police needs to start thinking about more carefully. I think there needs to be real justice. I think police should be held to the same standard as other civilians when it comes to crimes. And I think that the way even the news is reacting to this in some ways is very indicative of how racist our culture is. I really hope that we can change. Black Lives Matter!
All lives matter!
Hey, I'm Amelia. I'm studying social work here. I just wanted to speak out about Just remembering to keep Ferguson in your minds and remembering to be non-judgmental, because it's really great that we're all here and participating in this advocacy, but it's also really important that we remember that we're provided with the privilege to have a peaceful protest, and it comes from a place of living in an environment of privilege. So I just want to, speak out about remaining non-judgmental and not feeling above anyone. Thank you.
Excuse me. My name is Robert Tyson. I teach English at RVCC. Just two real quick points. I want to point out that one of the things that the media has glossed over in the whole issue, Mike Brown, is they've created this idea that, well, the judicial process has carried itself out. Well, there are two bad assumptions there. Number one, that the judicial process is just, and that the process is carried out. If you've been following the case, you know that one of the things that happened is that there's questions of how the grand jury was instructed and how the case was presented to them. And so that's part of the fight isn't over, because a grand jury doesn't acquit someone. A grand jury just decides that it doesn't want to pass down an indictment. So the door is still open for re-indictment even by the state of Missouri, not to speak about what the federal government can do. So that's an area in which we can be active. The other thing is this, I was born and raised in Harlem, and I'm up from the block, quite as kept. And one of the things we always used to say is that if you hang around the barbershop long enough, you're going to get a haircut. And how that applies here is that one of the other things that we can fight around is this increasing militarization of the police. If you looked at the video clips and you watched television around Ferguson, you know that you saw tanks, automatic weapons, all kinds of things that you see on TV, when they're going to fight the Martians, or that the U.S. military used when, in Central Asia, over the last 20 years and everything. And what happened was, is our involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan started to wind down. They had all this surplus military equipment, and what they started doing was they started selling it to local police departments. If the local police departments buy that military equipment, they're going to use it. And I was standing over there, because I couldn't remember the name of the case of where it took place, but there was a case earlier this year in Georgia where a family from Thailand, one of the male members of the family was assumed to be a drug dealer. And so what happened is the Georgia SWAT went in with the helmets, with the bulletproof vests, with the automatic weapons. And what they did was, in order to enter the house, they threw a flashbang grenade into the house, and if you've seen them on TV, it makes a loud noise and it flashes, and the inhabitants of the house are supposed to be stunned, and that allows the authorities to run in and, with a little resistance, to do what they want to do. And what happened is the flashbang landed in the crib of an infant and burned the infant, so the infant suffered these second and third degree burns, as a result of the flashbang, and the cops were found not at fault. My point is simply this, that you can't throw a flashbang if you don't have a flashbang. And so I just see that what's going to happen is that we're going to be increasingly faced by incidents of excessive police force and, police brutality. It's going to affect all of us, not just black men, but everybody, simply because the police have those weapons. And if they have them, they are going to use them. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
And the one word that I want to say is respect. Because there are two things about Ferguson that have upset me almost more than anything. One, and they're bookends. They're the beginning of the incident and the end of the incident. One of them is hearsay. I don't know whether it's true, but the other one, everybody knows. And it's at the beginning, the altercation started by a cop telling two black men in the middle of the street to get the fuck out of the street. Nobody would ever say that to me. And if that cop had used his words more respectfully, those two black men might not have responded respectfully. But they wouldn't have had reason to be upset with that cop. We don't know if that's really what the cop said, but that upsets me. Because that's a lack of respect for the people those cops are supposed to be protecting. At the end, what we do know for sure is that Mike Brown's body lay in the street for 4.5 hours. His mother was not allowed to go. His father was not allowed to go. And they just watched it. That's not respect. Black Lives Matter.
I'd like to invite Stanley Asiegbulem, who is the Black Student Association president and a student of mine who I greatly respect and admire, and a fine poet, to read a poem by the poet Denez Smith, who is a currently active poet, young black man. And this is a poem that Denez Smith wrote about Ferguson. Stanley, would you like to read, please?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Not an elegy from Mike Brown by Denez Smith. I'm sick of writing this poem, Bring the Boy. His new name, his same old body, ordinary black dead thing. Bring him. We will mourn until we forget what we are mourning. And isn't that what being black is about? Not the joy of it, but the feeling you get when you are looking at your child to turn your head and poof, no more child. That feeling, that's black. Think, once, a white girl was kidnapped, and that was the Trojan War. Later, up the block, Troy got shot, and that was Tuesday. Are we not worthy of a city of ash, of 1,000 ships launched because we are missed? Always something deserves to be burned. It's never the right thing nowadays. I demand a war to bring the dead boy back, no matter what his name is. At least demand a song. A song would do just fine. Look at what the Lord has made above Missouri, sweet smoke.
We have an opportunity to do this during the march. You know, one plans things and things don't always go exactly according to plan. But Dante, if you'd like to read the names of unarmed black men and women who have been killed by police and vigilantes since 2012. And then I asked that perhaps we could, at the suggestion of Michelle, that we hold 4.5 minutes of silence out of respect for these people and for Mike Brown, and in recognition of the 4.5 hours that he lay on the pavement after he had been shot.
Von Derek Myers Jr., Tamar Rife, Cameron Tillman, Oscar Graham, Ramarley Graham, Akai Gurley, Israel Hernandez, Victor White III, Dante Parker, Ezell Ford, Michael Brown, Tyree Woodson, John Crawford III, Eric Garner, Yvette Smith, Jordan Baker, Barrington Williams, Carlos Alcive, Trayvon Martin, Dion Flood, Jonathan Farrell, Kamani Gray, Kayam Livingston, Larry Eugene Jackson Jr., Miriam Carey, Chavez Carter, Dante Pierce, Dwayne Brown, Irving Jefferson, Jersey Green, Johnny Kamani Warren, Justin Slip, Kenderick McDay, Melissa Williams, Nehemiah Dillard, Raymond Allen, Rakia Boyd, Ronaldo Cuevas, Robert Dumas Jr., Sergeant Manuel Logans Jr., Chantel Davis, Charmel Edwards, Cherise Francis, Taman Robinson, Timothy Russell, Wendy Allen.
Thank you. And let's take 4.5 minutes of silence, please, for these people. Website that I got a lot of the ideas, for this from, is fergusonaction.com. I invite you to visit it and to look at the resources there. I'd like to thank the people who have helped me organize. I'd like to thank Andrea. I'd like to thank Carl. I'd like to thank Karen and Andy. I'd like to thank I'm sorry, I'm a little emotional, so I'm not going to remember everybody, but thank you to everybody. And the last thing I'll say is that, if you are a student here during class time, I do have sheets over there that you can sign, put your name and the professor's name, and I'll be happy to email your professors and tell them that you were here and that's why you were absent or why you missed part of class.
If you're looking for other marches and organizations that are holding prayer vigils and things like that, you can go on Larry Ham's website, Organization for Progress, and Reverend Al Sharpman. They're organizing several marches, Newark, New York, and various areas. So you can look on those websites to get more information for other marches.
Thank you very much, and thank you, everybody. Really hard. It really got me angry. And I just thought, I'm a white guy, and I'm really just pissed off about this. I can only imagine what it must be like for people of color. So I said, I got to do something. And then I found out on Ferguson Action that they were doing these demonstrations around the country. So I said, well, I guess I can spearhead planning one, and I wanted to make it, inclusive and not just about me. So, that's why I brought in, Stanley and the association and other faculty members.
Now, did the faculty members that were involved and the students that got involved, how many would you say knew beforehand that there was a protest? Do you think it grew organically? Like, did they just come along?
Yeah, it definitely grew organically. I mean, faculty-wise, I think he handled that end, but student-wise, the email blast that was sent out, a lot of kids even approached me about it afterwards, which was great because I wasn't expecting, to be honest, I really wasn't expecting the kind of turnout that we had today, because when I first came to this college, I really wanted to, do things like this, get involved, some sort of activism in the community. But, the classic community college mindset is that, you come to school, you take the classes, you go home. And I saw this as an opportunity too, and I just sent out the email, and it just grew. And just about a day.
Yeah. There was originally they were planning. Ferguson Action was planning events on Monday of this week, Monday at 1 o'clock, and my initial response was, "Oh, we got to do it." But then I'm like, "Wait a minute, it's Sunday on a holiday weekend. Nobody's checking their emails." So I said, "All right, we can't do it too late. We want to be able to stay kind of within the window of when people are doing these things, so that we have the momentum of the national events. But at the same time, I'm like, we got to be realistic. We can't put this together in a couple hours on Monday morning." So.
How do you think we can end these attacks by cops?
Personally, I think it requires a lot of actions like this one to start that fire that people can feel and employ into their own lives, specifically people with the power and influence to affect that type of change. But what I realize the problem is that most people don't even know about these types of things. I don't want to say they're apathetic to it. They're just ignorant of it, which is the problem. So exposure to it on this type of level, especially in community college, is, I think, the first step.
There needs to be systemic change as well. There needs to be a difference in the way that we view people of color, and also you pick your group. People of color, poor people, gay people, whatever. In this case, people of color in particular. We need to change the way we view them, change the narrative surrounding them. This notion that you see a black man and there's this instinct by some white people to reach for their goods and protect them or something, and this sort of characterization. We need to change the narrative, we need to do things like Stanley just described in order to do that. We need to educate people, and also I would say I'm a supporter of cops wearing cameras.
I was going to ask you guys about that.
Body cams. I think with body cams, in an ideal world, we would say that anyone who's a police officer has that moral obligation to stay within the law and go by the law verbatim. But we don't live in that ideal world, and I think with a body cam, cops have no choice now but to behave accordingly. And that, if anything, is among one of those first steps that I was talking about, because with that, it opens a lot of other doors.
Okay. Now you were talking about, a lot of officers that have the, I guess, instinct to grab their guns when they see a person of color. Is that the same as racism, as being racist, or do you think there's a difference?
It's a form of racism. I think that most people, very few people would say, I am a racist, and I actively, hate a particular group. But we've been programmed to assume certain things. It's almost like, it's because there's a great African-American psychologist named Beverly Daniel Tatum who said that, we can't stop, we breathe in smog, we breathe pollution in the air, and it becomes a part of us. We may not be the ones polluting the air, but it's still becoming part of us. It's the same thing with racism. We may not be creating the racism, but we're taking it in and making it a part of ourselves. So that's what I think is what's happening. It's just sort of we're products of our environments. And that is causing us to have racist reactions. And we need to examine those things and say, not be defensive and not say that. I mean, I will even say that, I will even admit that I myself, throughout my life have struggled sometimes, and had to push back against the ways that I've been programmed. I think everybody does.
Yeah, on that note, I think we've moved from a different definition of racism compared to what it was in the 60s. I think it's largely no longer about hate. There was a time in America where racism was deep-seated in hatred, but it's no longer governed by hatred as much as it is by a superiority complex and an inferiority complex. This myth of black inferiority complex, I think racism has instilled that in a lot of people of color, and to build on top of that is the inferiority complex that racism has instilled in white people, or Caucasians in general, and that's a new sort of racist ideology that we have to fight.
Yeah, I agree with that.
What do you think should be changed about the justice system, if anything?
Where do we start?
Yeah, no kidding.
Where do we start? I think for one thing, there needs to be a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? Transparency?
Yeah.
There needs to be so much more transparency in the way the justice system works and justice is found. Honestly, I really don't know where to begin. There's so many
What do you mean
points
by
I can touch.
transparency?
Well, for one thing, during the verdict and indictment process, all we knew about it was what the prosecutor told us. And I mean, from the get-go, if you look at his background, he comes from a very biased perspective, where he knew a lot of police officers, and he's been in the system for, I believe it was about 8 to 10 years or so. And the way he presented information didn't feel like how a prosecutor should. It didn't seem objective. It was very, very biased.
There was a direct conflict of interest too, because it came out that he owns a company that was selling T-shirts that were saying like "I am Darren Wilson" and I support Darren Wilson. So that shed some light. That shed some concerns on his credibility. To answer the large and his alleged neutrality. But to speak to your larger question, I agree with Stanley that there needs to be more transparency. And also, I would say that there needs to be, the same way that individuals need to look at each other, look at themselves and recognize their own inherent tendencies towards bias, which they have largely in many cases not because it's their fault, but just because it's the smog they breathed in. The justice system needs to be frank about that too and say we have inhaled this. We have started, we incarcerate black men at an astronomical rate compared to white men for the same offenses, particularly drug offenses, minor drug offenses, where a white dude gets community service and a black guy goes to jail for at least 3 to 5 years.
Now, what did you want students to think when you were marching through the school? Like students that were watching you guys, did you have something in mind that you wanted to feel when you marched?
Yeah, well, the first thing, because I try to think, put in perspective as a student in a class, hearing this happening. The first thing I wanted was to ask the what and the why, what's going on and why they're doing it, and whether it is them coming to one of the people, walking with posters, or one of the people chanting, what is this and why are you guys doing it? Because that answers back to the question of how do we approach this, to solve the problem, and that's by informing people of what's going on. So that was what I wanted people to ask what and why, because a lot of people really don't understand why all these protests across the country going on. They don't have the platform because they haven't asked the right questions and they haven't been given the right answers.
So was it like intentional to like surprise everybody?
Yeah, not as much surprise as to make it alarming. Because we did send out that email blast to let people know that this was happening.
And there were flyers everywhere.
Right, but I think actually seeing it happen with as much people as we had come through, I think that alone is what's going to make people ask the question, what and why.
There's that, and there's also the empowerment angle, in the sense that there are probably people around campus who think that who probably feel the way we do, they just feel kind of helpless, like what are you going to do? It's just, like the poem says, Trey was shot last Tuesday. And we want to, and at least part of what I wanted was for them to say, oh wow, some people actually are doing something and standing up. There are people who this matters to. Maybe I can too. Maybe this is something that we should be talking about.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I mean, I'm grateful that people came through concerning this as a subject matter.
I'll second him with the gratitude towards you and towards those who showed up, and just to give a call to tell people to examine yourselves compassionately. Don't sit there and judge yourself and think that you're a bad person, because that's just going to lead to a dead end and resentment. Just sit there and say, where are the times I've failed as a person? Where are the times I've held discriminatory attitudes, and where do they come from? And how can I challenge them?